So, so yeah, I mean, wisdom, right? I mean, big concept. It's a multi-layered concept, and people have no sense of that now. And we do a great favor to our culture to try to insist that people understand what wisdom is all about.
Mm. You write in the book that citizenship isn't just a legal status, it's a moral calling.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to like follow up on this guardrails.
Yeah.
Like it's a moral calling. Like I'm thinking of Marcus Aurelius writing this meditation to himself about kind of duties and obligations to get out of bed and do the business of being a human.
Yeah.
You know, are a moral calling or duties and obligations, are those examples of guardrails on a, from the individual perspective?
Yeah, they have both sides to them, I think, but the guardrail side is really important because what Marcus understood at a really intuitive level is I don't exist just for me. And that's a big piece of news to a lot of people in our time, right? I exist for the greater community. I am a part of a whole. Nothing is good for me that's not good for the community. Those are some powerful pieces of insight Marcus had. And he tried to remind himself of that frequently because there's this gravitational pull of the ego. It's almost like wisdom is rocket fuel to help us escape the gravity of foolishness. It's like we gotta break out of the gravity. We need a certain kind of propulsion to keep us from being egocentric monomaniacs about what we think wrongly is our own good. And for Marcus, it could be something as simple as just staying in bed all morning. And he had to remind himself of his duties, his obligations. And we think of duties as obligations almost as an unfortunate necessity in life. And he seemed to think of them as very different from that. These are important ingredients in living a good life. And I can't live a good life unless the people around me are living a good life. And that's what a lot of businesses are just beginning to wake up to with respect to politics. You can't have good commerce, good business in a cultural wasteland where everybody's at war with everybody else. That's not, again, back to Pascal in context, that's not the context in which business can flourish. People need to be flourishing, right? And so our politicians need to wake up to some of these guardrails, or else we end up not just with an environmental catastrophe, we end up with cultural catastrophe, with social catastrophe, with economic catastrophe. And it's in our day that we are being, what an exciting time to be alive, because it's almost like every possible human problem is on steroids right now. Every possible human problem is projected on the biggest scale, where we've been able to tread water and ignore a lot of important things about wisdom, both the guidance and the guardrails. But we're at a time now where things as diverse as the environment and AI are calling us to not make any more big mistakes, because guess what? At this point, such magnitude of foolishness is no longer survivable. And so we're being forced to re-examine, our lives, our perspectives, and to go back and look for wisdom in the past for what we face next in our own future.
Hearing you talk about duties and obligations and everything we've been talking about, I don't know, it's making me think in the way of like the everyday patriot, some of our naturalized citizens, for example, in this country are some of the most, patriotic in the way of this thing of becoming a naturalized citizen. And and for individuals that were born here, this citizenship, there's no sort of, unless you impose some of these duties and obligations, this moral calling, there isn't, it's like this freely given thing.
I know, it is interesting, isn't it? I mean, I used to tell my students, because a lot of students thought that just being in the classroom, they're going to get an education. And I use the old metaphor, sleeping in a garage doesn't make you a car,